I was lying on the examination table, gel on my belly, watching my baby move on the ultrasound screen for the first time. My husband, Mark, was holding my hand, and I was crying tears of joy. After 3 miscarriages and 8 years of trying, we were finally going to have our baby. But then my doctor's face changed. She excused Mark from the room, and once the door closed, she grabbed both my hands and said 6 words I'll never forget. "Sophia, you need to divorce him." I stared at her, completely frozen. What could she possibly have seen on that ultrasound that would make her beg me to leave my husband? Let me take you back to the beginning. I met Mark when I was 29 years old, working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company in Seattle. He was 32, a software engineer at the same company, charming, attentive, and unlike anyone I'd ever dated before. While my previous boyfriends had been flaky or emotionally unavailable, Mark seemed like he had it all figured out. He brought me coffee every morning, remembered little details about my day, and talked about the future like I was always going to be part of it. We got married a year and a half after we met, in a beautiful ceremony overlooking Puget Sound. I was 31, and I felt like my life was finally falling into place. I had a career I enjoyed, a husband who adored me, and dreams of starting a family. We decided to wait a year before trying for kids. We wanted to travel, save money, buy a house. Looking back now, I can see how carefully Mark orchestrated everything, but at the time, I just thought he was being responsible. When I turned 32, we started trying. I was excited, naive even. I thought it would happen right away. My mom had gotten pregnant with me on her first try, and I just assumed I'd inherited her fertility. Month after month passed with negative pregnancy tests. Mark was patient, supportive. He'd hold me when I cried, tell me it would happen when the time was right, suggest we just enjoy the process and not stress about it. After a year of trying, I went to my doctor. She ran some basic tests, everything came back normal. She told me to keep trying, that sometimes it just takes time, especially as we get older. I was 33 by then, and I was starting to feel the pressure. Not from Mark, though. He never pressured me. If anything, he seemed almost too relaxed about the whole thing. Then finally, when I was 34, I got pregnant. I took the test on a Sunday morning while Mark was out running errands. I saw those 2 pink lines and I screamed. I called my best friend Jessica before I even told Mark. I was that excited. When Mark came home, I'd set up this whole elaborate surprise with baby booties on the kitchen table. He seemed happy, genuinely happy. We celebrated that night with sparkling cider and started talking about names. I made it to 8 weeks. I remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong. I was at work in the middle of a meeting and I felt this sharp cramping. I excused myself to the bathroom and saw the blood. I've never felt panic like that before. I called Mark, crying so hard I could barely speak. He left work immediately and met me at the emergency room. The doctor confirmed what I already knew in my heart. I'd lost the baby. They called it a missed miscarriage. The embryo had stopped developing at around 6 weeks, but my body hadn't recognized it yet. I had to have a procedure called a D&C to remove the tissue. Mark held my hand through all of it. He took a week off work to take care of me. He brought me soup, rubbed my back while I cried, told me we'd try again when I was ready. Everyone told me how lucky I was to have such a supportive husband. My mom said Mark was 1 in a million. Jessica said her husband hadn't been nearly as understanding when she'd had her miscarriage. I believed I was lucky. I believed Mark was my person, the one who would help me through anything. We waited 3 months before trying again, like the doctor recommended. And I got pregnant again almost immediately. This time, I was more cautious. I didn't tell anyone except Mark until after the first ultrasound. I avoided caffeine completely, took my prenatal vitamins religiously, barely lifted anything heavier than my purse. I was convinced that if I did everything perfectly, everything would be fine. I made it to 10 weeks that time. We just had our first ultrasound, seen the heartbeat, heard that beautiful fluttering sound. I'd finally told my parents and Jessica. I'd started looking at maternity clothes online, letting myself believe it was real. And then one morning I woke up bleeding, heavier than the first time. Mark rushed me to the hospital again, and again they confirmed I'd lost the baby. This one broke me in a different way. The first miscarriage had been devastating, but I'd told myself it was common, that it happened to lots of women, that we'd try again. The second one made me feel like my body was betraying me, like I was fundamentally broken. I spiraled into depression. I took a month off work. I barely got out of bed. And through it all, Mark was there, bringing me food I didn't eat, sitting with me while I stared at the wall, telling me it wasn't my fault. My doctor ran more tests. Everything still came back normal. Chromosomally normal embryos, no uterine abnormalities, no blood clotting disorders, no thyroid issues. She said sometimes these things just happen, that we could try again, that maybe the next one would stick. I felt like I was going crazy. How could everything be normal when I kept losing bobbies? We waited 6 months before trying again. I needed time to heal both physically and emotionally. I started seeing a therapist. She helped me work through the grief, the guilt, the fear of trying again. Mark came to a few sessions with me. He talked about his own grief, his worry about me, his hope for the future. My therapist said we had a really strong relationship, that not all couples survive multiple miscarriages. I felt grateful for Mark all over again. When I turned 36, we decided to try one more time. I was terrified, but I also couldn't let go of the dream of being a mother. This time, I got pregnant right away again. And this time, I didn't let myself feel hope. I went through the motions, took my vitamins, went to my appointments, but I kept my emotional distance. I didn't buy anything for the baby. I didn't look at names. I barely talked about it, even with Mark. But I made it past 8 weeks, then past 10. At 12 weeks, we had the nuchal translucency scan, and everything looked good. At 16 weeks, I started to feel tiny flutters, and slowly, carefully, I started to let myself believe. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe the third time really was the charm. And then at 18 weeks, I woke up bleeding again. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to send me into a panic attack so severe that Mark had to call an ambulance. At the hospital, they did an ultrasound. The baby was fine. Strong heartbeat, moving around, measuring perfectly. The bleeding was from a subchorionic hematoma, essentially a bruise in my uterus. Not uncommon, they said. Nothing to worry about, they said. Just take it easy, they said. But I lost the baby 2 days later. Went into premature labor at 18 weeks and delivered a tiny, perfect baby boy who never took a breath. They let me hold him. He fit in my hands. Mark was there, crying with me, but I remember feeling so alone in that moment. So utterly, completely alone. We named him Ethan. We had a small memorial service with just family. And then I shut down completely. I told Mark I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep trying just to keep losing. I was 37 years old, I'd lost 3 bobbies, and I was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Mark, surprisingly, agreed. He said he just wanted me to be okay, that we could look into adoption, or we could just be the cool aunt and uncle to our nieces and nephews. He said he loved me more than he wanted to be a father, and that was enough for him. I believed him. God, I believed every word. We spent the next year just existing. I threw myself into work, got promoted to senior marketing manager. Mark and I traveled. We went to Japan, to Iceland, to New Zealand. We were filling our lives with other things, trying to move forward. But there was this hole inside me that nothing could fill. On my 38th birthday, I had this moment of clarity. I was blowing out the candles on my cake, and I realized that I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I knew the statistics. I knew that getting pregnant and staying pregnant at 38 was harder than it had been at 34. But I also knew that I'd regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't try one more time. I talked to Mark that night. I was prepared for him to say no, to remind me of how hard the miscarriages had been, to suggest we stick with our plan to be child-free. But instead, he held me and said, "If you want to try again, we'll try again. Whatever you need." I went back to my doctor. She was supportive but cautious. She referred me to a reproductive endocrinologist, a specialist in high-risk pregnancies and recurrent pregnancy loss. I had every test imaginable, and once again, everything came back normal. The specialist said we could try with medical management, progesterone suppositories, baby aspirin, closer monitoring. She said my history was concerning, but not uncommon, and that plenty of women with similar stories went on to have healthy bobbies. We tried for 4 months. 4 months of perfectly timed intercourse, progesterone, hope, and disappointment. I was starting to think it wasn't going to happen, that maybe my body knew something I didn't want to accept. And then, in my 5th cycle, I got a positive test. I didn't tell Mark right away this time. I went to the doctor, got my blood drawn, confirmed with HCG levels that I was pregnant. I started the progesterone immediately. I had my levels checked every other day for 2 weeks. They were rising perfectly. At 6 weeks, I had my first ultrasound. There was a heartbeat. I let myself cry just for a moment before I locked it all back down. I told Mark that night. He was cautiously optimistic, which I appreciated. No over-the-top celebrations, no premature planning. Just a quiet acknowledgement that we were pregnant again and we'd take it one day at a time. The weeks crawled by. Every time I went to the bathroom, I expected blood. Every twinge, every cramp sent me into a spiral of anxiety. But at 8 weeks, there was still a heartbeat. At 10 weeks, still a heartbeat. At 12 weeks, we did the nuchal translucency scan and genetic screening. Everything was normal. Low risk for chromosomal abnormalities. The baby was measuring perfectly. I started to let myself hope, just a little. I told my parents, told Jessica. They were happy but worried, I could tell. They'd been through the losses with me. They'd seen how destroyed I'd been. But they wanted to be supportive, so they smiled and hugged me and said all the right things. At 16 weeks, I started to feel movement, little bubbles and flutters that made my breath catch. I put my hand on my belly and whispered to the baby, "Please stay, please be okay." Mark would talk to my belly too, tell the baby about all the things we'd do together. Part of me loved it. Part of me wanted to tell him to stop, that he was jinxing it. At 18 weeks, the point where I'd lost Ethan, I barely slept. I was convinced that history would repeat itself, but I made it through. 18 weeks, 19 weeks. And then came the 20-week anatomy scan. The big ultrasound where they check all the organs, measure everything, make sure the baby is developing correctly. I scheduled it for a Friday morning. Mark took the morning off work to come with me. I'd been seeing Dr. Sarah Chen for all my prenatal care. She was the high-risk OB my specialist had recommended. She was kind, thorough, and she'd been monitoring me closely throughout the pregnancy. I trusted her. We sat in the waiting room, Mark scrolling through his phone, me picking at my cuticles. When they called my name, my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. The ultrasound tech was cheerful, chatty. She squirted the gel on my belly and started moving the probe around. There on the screen was my baby. Moving, kicking, so much bigger than the last time I'd seen them. "Do you want to know the sex?" she asked. I looked at Mark. We talked about this. We decided we wanted to know. "Yes," I said. "It's a girl," she said, smiling. "A healthy-looking baby girl." I burst into tears. Mark squeezed my hand. A girl. We were having a daughter. After everything, we were actually going to have a baby. The tech took all her measurements, checked all the organs, showed us her tiny face, her perfect little hands and feet. Everything looked good, she said. Dr. Chen would review the images and come talk to us. We waited in the exam room, Mark looking at baby girl names on his phone, me just trying to breathe and believe this was real. When Dr. Chen came in, she was smiling, but something was off. I could see it in her eyes. "Everything with the baby looks great," she said. "All the measurements are perfect, all the organs are developing beautifully. You're having a very healthy baby girl." "But," I said, because I could hear the unspoken word. "But I noticed something else on the ultrasound," she said carefully. "Something I need to ask you about." My stomach dropped. What's wrong?" "Sophia, have you been taking any medications or supplements that Mark doesn't know about?" I was confused. "No, just my prenatal vitamin and the progesterone you prescribed. Why?" Dr. Chen glanced at the door, then back at me. "Mark, would you mind giving us a few minutes? I need to do a quick exam, and it might be more comfortable for Sophia if it's just us." Mark looked surprised but nodded. "Sure, of course. I'll be right outside." As soon as the door closed, Dr. Chen's entire demeanor changed. She pulled her chair close to the exam table and took both my hands. "Sophia, I need you to listen to me very carefully," she said. "I saw something on your ultrasound that's very concerning, but it has nothing to do with your baby." "I don't understand," I whispered. "Your uterine lining shows signs of chronic inflammation and scarring. But it's not the kind of scarring we'd expect from multiple D and C procedures or natural miscarriages. This looks like chemical damage. Specifically, the kind of damage we see when someone has been exposed to certain substances over an extended period. My mind was reeling. What kind of substances? Sophia, have you heard of misoprostol? No, what is it? It's a medication used to induce labor and to complete miscarriages. It causes the uterus to contract and expel tissue. It's also one of the medications used in medical abortions. I felt like I was going to throw up. I've never taken anything like that. I swear, I would never. I believe you, she said, her voice gentle but urgent. Which is why I'm asking you, is there any way someone could have been giving it to you without your knowledge? The room started spinning. I don't. Who would do that? But even as I said it, pieces started clicking together in my mind. The coffee Mark brought me every morning when I was pregnant. How he was always so insistent that I take my vitamins right when he handed them to me. How he'd make me smoothies and teas, especially during my pregnancies. How he always seemed so calm, so accepting when I miscarried, while I was falling apart. Dr. Chen must have seen something in my face because she squeezed my hands tighter. Sophia, I can't tell you what to do with this information, but I need you to understand the implications. The damage to your uterus is significant. The fact that you're pregnant now and the baby is healthy suggests that you're no longer being exposed to whatever was causing the damage. But if you were to be exposed again, I could lose this baby too, I finished, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, she said, and possibly never be able to carry another pregnancy to term. I was shaking. My husband, you think my husband has been poisoning me. I'm not making accusations, Dr. Chen said carefully, but I am telling you what I see on your ultrasound, and I'm telling you that you need to protect yourself and your baby. Do you have somewhere safe you can go, someone you can stay with? I thought of Jessica. She'd been my best friend since college. She lived across town with her husband David and their 2 kids. My friend Jessica, I said. I can call her. Good, Dr. Chen said. I want you to do that today, right now if possible. And Sophia, I need you to be very careful. Don't eat or drink anything Mark gives you. Don't tell him what we discussed. Just get yourself somewhere safe and then we can figure out next steps. But what if I'm wrong? I said, even though deep down I knew I wasn't. What if there's another explanation? Then we'll find it, Dr. Chen said. But right now, your priority has to be keeping yourself and your baby safe. Can you do that? I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I'm going to send Mark back in, she said. Act normal. I'll tell him everything looks great with the baby, which is true. You're going to schedule your next appointment, and then you're going to go home and pack a bag. Okay. Okay, I whispered. Dr. Chen opened the door and called Mark back in. She smiled at both of us and went through all the normal anatomy scan results. Baby was measuring at 20 weeks exactly. All organs looked perfect. Heartbeat was strong. She'd see us back in 4 weeks for our next checkup. Mark was beaming, asking questions about when we'd need to set up the nursery, what we should be thinking about for labor and delivery. I sat there feeling like I was watching someone else's life. This couldn't be real. Mark couldn't have been causing my miscarriages. He loved me. He'd held me while I cried. He'd grieved with me. Except, had he really been grieving? Or had he just been going through the motions, comforting me for losing Bobbies that he'd made sure I would lose? We drove home in Mark's car. He was talking about baby names, about how excited his parents would be to have a granddaughter, about how we should start looking at cribs this weekend. I made appropriate sounds, nodded at the right times, but inside I was screaming. When we got home, Mark said he was going to run to the store to pick up ingredients for dinner. He wanted to make my favorite pasta dish to celebrate finding out we were having a girl. I told him that sounded great, kissed him goodbye like I always did, and waited until his car pulled out of the driveway. Then I called Jessica. Sophia, what's wrong? You sound. Can I come stay with you? I interrupted. Like right now, and can you not ask any questions yet? There was a pause. Then, of course, come now, I'll make up the guest room. I grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing clothes into it. Toiletries, my laptop, chargers, important documents. I was moving on autopilot, trying not to think, trying not to feel. But then I stopped in the bathroom, staring at the bottle of prenatal vitamins on the counter. The bottle Mark had bought for me at the pharmacy 2 months ago. I picked it up with shaking hands. They looked like normal prenatal vitamins, but what if they weren't? What if he'd been putting something in them? I threw the bottle in my bag. Maybe I could get them tested somehow. Then I went to the kitchen. Mark had made me a smoothie that morning, like he did most mornings. I'd only drunk half of it before we left for the ultrasound. It was still in the fridge. I poured it into a mason jar, sealed it tight, and put it in my bag too. I was about to leave when I remembered Mark's office. He kept it locked, said he had sensitive work documents and didn't want them accidentally disturbed. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? But now I couldn't leave without at least trying. I went to his office door and tried the handle, locked as always. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding. Then I went to Mark's nightstand. He had a small box where he kept random things, old watches, cufflinks, spare keys. I dumped it out on the bed and there it was, a small silver key. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock, but it turned. The door opened. Mark's office looked normal at first glance. Desk with his work laptop, bookshelf, filing cabinet. But then I noticed a locked drawer in his desk. I tried the same key. It didn't work. I searched the desk for another key, getting more frantic by the second. And then I saw it taped to the underside of the desk drawer. A tiny key. I unlocked the drawer, and my entire world shattered. Inside were boxes of misoprostol. Not just 1 or 2 pills. Boxes, dozens of tablets. There was also a box of something called mifepristone. I didn't know what that was, but seeing it next to the misoprostol made my stomach churn. There were also packets of powdered substances labeled with chemical names I didn't recognize. But it was the notebook that broke me. A composition notebook, the kind you'd use in school. I opened it with trembling hands. The first page was dated 9 years ago, shortly before we got married. In Mark's handwriting, it said, "She wants kids, I don't, but I can't tell her that or she'll leave. Solution, let her think she can have kids but make sure she never does." I flipped through the pages, my vision blurring with tears. He'd documented everything. Every time he'd given me misoprostol, crushed into my coffee, mixed into smoothies, even ground up in my prenatal vitamins. He'd noted the dosages, the timing, the results. He'd written about my miscarriages like they were science experiments. First pregnancy, gave her 200 micrograms in her morning coffee for 3 days. Miscarriage at 8 weeks. She was devastated, had to comfort her. It was annoying but necessary. Second pregnancy, increased dosage to 400 micrograms. Worked faster this time. Miscarriage at 10 weeks. She's getting depressed. Might need to wait longer before trying again. Third pregnancy, she's being more careful this time, barely eating or drinking anything I give her. Had to be creative, put it in her prenatal vitamins. 18 weeks this time before it worked. She had to deliver the baby. That was harder to watch. She named him Ethan. She's completely broken now, told her we should stop trying. She agreed. I couldn't breathe. I was going to vomit. I ran to his office bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left. When I finally stood up, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. Pale, hollow-eyed, shaking, I looked like a ghost. I went back to the drawer. Under the notebook was a folder. Inside were printouts from online forums, articles about how to cause miscarriages, information about detection and how to avoid it. There were also photos. Photos of me, pregnant, taken from angles I didn't know he'd captured. Some of them had dates and notes on the back. Gave her the dose today. Should see results in 48 to 72 hours. At the bottom of the drawer was a letter. Sealed, addressed to me, marked to be given to Sophia if she ever finds out. I opened it. "Sophia, if you're reading this, you know the truth now. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I never wanted to hurt you, but I also never wanted kids. I thought I could change your mind over time, but you were so obsessed with becoming a mother that I realized you'd never let it go. I couldn't leave you. I do love you in my own way. You're beautiful, smart, you make me look good to my family and colleagues. But I couldn't let you trap me with a child I never wanted, so I did what I had to do. I know you probably hate me right now. You probably want to turn me into the police, but think about it carefully. Do you really want everyone to know how easily you were fooled? How you never noticed that your own husband was poisoning you for years? The scandal, the humiliation, the questions everyone will ask about how you could be so stupid. Or you could keep this between us. Divorce me quietly. Tell people we grew apart. I'll give you whatever settlement you want. I won't fight you. But if you go to the police, if you try to destroy my life, I'll make sure everyone knows what an oblivious fool you were. The choice is yours. Mark. I stood there, reading those words over and over again, and something inside me just hardened. The grief, the shock, the betrayal, it all crystallized into pure, cold fury. I took photos of everything. The medications, the notebook, every single page, the letter, the articles, the photos he'd taken of me. I documented every single piece of evidence in that drawer. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as it had been, locked the drawer, replaced the key, locked the office, and put the office key back in his nightstand box. I grabbed my duffel bag and walked out of that house. I got in my car and drove to Jessica's. I was calm, eerily calm. The kind of calm that comes when you've gone so far past panic that you loop back around to clarity. Jessica took one look at my face and pulled me inside. Her kids were at school, her husband David was at work. It was just us. I sat down at her kitchen table and told her everything. Every word Dr. Chen had said, every horrific thing I'd found in Mark's office. I showed her the photos on my phone. She cried, she screamed. She called Mark things I didn't know she knew the words for. And then she hugged me and said, "We're calling the police, right now." "No," I said, "not yet." "What do you mean, not yet? Sophia, he's been poisoning you. He's been murdering your bobbies. You can't just—" "I need to think," I said. "I need to figure out the best way to handle this." Jessica stared at me. "The best way is to have him arrested." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm 20 weeks pregnant. I'm barely holding it together. I can't deal with a criminal investigation right now, a trial, media attention, all of it. I need to focus on keeping this baby safe." "So what are you going to do?" I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew I needed one. I stayed at Jessica's house that weekend. I told Mark I needed some space, that I was feeling overwhelmed about the pregnancy and needed to be with my friend. He sounded confused but said he understood, that he'd give me whatever time I needed. It took everything in me not to scream at him through the phone. On Monday, I called a lawyer. Not a criminal lawyer, not yet. A divorce lawyer, one who specialized in high-conflict cases. Her name was Patricia Morgan, and she came highly recommended. I met with her that afternoon. I showed her everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker by the minute. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and said, "This is one of the most disturbing cases I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot." "What do I do?" I asked. "That depends on what you want," she said. "Do you want him in prison? Because what he did is absolutely criminal. Poisoning, possibly attempted murder multiple times if we count the bobbies, assault, battery. He could go away for a very long time. But criminal cases take time, energy, and emotional resources. You're pregnant. You need to minimize stress. A criminal investigation would be the opposite of that. It would be media coverage, depositions, testifying, reliving trauma over and over. And there's no guarantee of conviction, especially if he gets a good lawyer. So you think I should just let him get away with it?" "I didn't say that," Patricia said. "I'm saying you have options. You can pursue criminal charges, absolutely. Or you can use the threat of criminal charges to get everything you want in a divorce. Financial settlement, full custody if you want to pursue it, restraining orders, whatever you need. You hold all the cards here, Sophia. The question is, which outcome gives you the most peace and the best future for you and your daughter?" I thought about Mark's letter, about how he'd said he'd humiliate me if I went to the police, about how part of me was terrified that he was right, that people would ask how I could have been so blind, so stupid, so trusting. "I want him to suffer," I said quietly. "But I also want to move on. I want to have my baby in peace. I want to rebuild my life without him in it. I want him to know that he didn't win, that he didn't break me." Patricia nodded. "Then here's what we're going to do." Patricia worked fast. Within a week, I had a restraining order against Mark based on safety concerns for myself and my unborn child. He was ordered to stay away from me and to vacate our house. I got to stay there. My name was on the deed too, and Patricia argued that I needed stability during my high-risk pregnancy. Mark tried calling me, texting me, but I blocked his number. All communication went through lawyers. Patricia sent him a letter outlining what we knew. We attached copies of some of the photos I'd taken, just enough to make it clear we had evidence, but not so much that he'd know exactly what we had. The letter offered him a choice: sign a divorce settlement giving me the house, half of all our assets, and agreeing to a permanent restraining order, or face criminal charges for what he'd done. We gave him 72 hours to decide. He called Patricia's office within 24 hours. He'd sign. The divorce was finalized in record time. Mark signed over the house, transferred money into my account, agreed to a restraining order that would keep him at least 500 feet away from me at all times. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue criminal charges at that time, but I kept all the evidence. I made copies, put them in multiple safe places. If he ever came near me or tried anything, I could still destroy him. I never saw him again, not at the final court date. We appeared virtually. Not when he came to get his stuff from the house. I stayed at Jessica's while a moving company packed his things. He was just gone, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. Dr. Chen monitored me closely for the rest of my pregnancy. She ran extra tests to make sure the baby was okay, checked me every 2 weeks instead of every 4. I was terrified something would still go wrong, that the damage Mark had done would somehow affect this pregnancy, even though I wasn't being poisoned anymore. But my daughter was strong, stronger than I'd given her credit for. She kept growing, kept kicking, kept reminding me that she was here, she was real, and she was staying. I spent those months in therapy, processing everything that had happened. My therapist helped me understand that what Mark had done wasn't my fault. That being trusting and loving doesn't make someone stupid. That he was a sociopath who'd meticulously planned and executed a campaign of abuse that would have fooled anyone. I also spent those months preparing, not just for the baby, but for my new life. I sold the house. I couldn't stay there, not with all those memories. I bought a smaller place closer to Jessica, a fresh start. I set up a nursery with my own hands, painting the walls soft lavender, assembling the crib, washing tiny clothes. At 39 weeks, I went into labor. It was long, painful, terrifying, and the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. Jessica was with me as my birth partner. Dr. Chen delivered my daughter. When they placed her on my chest, she opened her eyes and looked right at me. She had my eyes, my nose, and thankfully, nothing that reminded me of Mark. I named her Grace, Grace Alina, because she was grace itself, undeserved, unexpected, miraculous. That was 3 years ago. Grace just turned 3 last month. She's brilliant, fierce, funny, and the light of my entire life. Being her mother is everything I dreamed it would be and so much more. I never pressed criminal charges against Mark. Sometimes I wonder if I should have. Sometimes I think about other women he might hurt, other lives he might destroy. But I made the choice I needed to make for my own peace and my daughter's well-being. I do know that I shared my story with Dr. Chen's hospital, and they now screen for this kind of abuse as part of their protocols. Maybe that will save someone else. Mark remarried 2 years ago. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he told his new wife he doesn't want kids. At least he's being honest this time. I hope she believes him. I hope she never sees the monster I saw. As for me, I'm 41 now. I'm still in therapy, still processing, still healing. Some days are harder than others. Grace asks about her father sometimes, and I tell her age-appropriate truths. That sometimes people aren't who we think they are, that her daddy made choices that hurt me, and that we're safer and happier without him. Someday, when she's older, I'll tell her the whole truth. But for now, she knows she's loved, she's safe, and she's wanted. I've learned that trust is both precious and dangerous. I've learned that love can blind us, but it can also give us the strength to survive when everything falls apart. I've learned that my body is stronger than I ever gave it credit for. And I've learned that sometimes the person you need to save you is yourself. If you're reading this and something in my story resonates with you, please listen to that instinct. If something feels off in your relationship, if you can't explain why you keep having health problems, if someone who claims to love you seems a little too comfortable with your pain, trust yourself. Get a second opinion. Ask questions. Protect yourself. And if you've been through something like this, know that you're not alone. Know that it wasn't your fault. Know that you can rebuild even when everything feels broken beyond repair. I look at Grace and I see my future instead of my past. She's the daughter I fought for, the miracle I refused to give up on. And she's proof that even after the darkest betrayal, even after the deepest pain, there's still hope. There's still joy. There's still life worth living. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there who needs it.